Hi, everyone, and welcome to this great conversation on Women in Pan, part of the Better Tomorrow series. My name is Attillah Springer, and it is my deep, deep pleasure to introduce to you and welcome today's guest, who is Michelle Huggins-Watts. Michelle, I'll just dive straight in and ask you what happened at the beginning. How did you get involved in music as a child?
As a child, at the age of like 4 or 5, my grandmother wanted me to learn the piano, to play the piano. So my mom said, okay, fine, send her off piano lessons. So that was my first introduction to music in the strict sense of music, not just listening to songs on the radio or anything like that. I was off to piano lessons and I really took to it because that's when I realized I really love music. Within a year's time, my grandmother said, she's looking like she's serious, you know. We're going to buy her a piano. So they bought me a Yamaha piano, and the rest is history in terms of the piano because I did all of my grades, theory and practical in piano and so on. And that was actually my first introduction to the world of music in a formal sense. Yeah.
At what point in your introduction to music did you first encounter the steelpan?
Oh, well, you know, as a kid, we would hear pan on the radio, or like for Panorama, we would see it like Panorama finals on television and so on. And I remember once or twice, my mother would have taken my brother and I to the grandstand, look at the pan and so on, but then there were crowds of people walking through with the bands and so on, you know. But what really struck it for me was actually seeing the performances on final night on TV. I find the panists look so much into the music, they're enjoying it. And back then, there was a prize for Spirit of Carnival and Best Dressed Band. So bands would be, you know, the flowery stuff and so on, and Spirit of Carnival, so they're playing and you know. And I used to find it looked so exciting, and I just only wished I could play this instrument. So that was basically it, you know.
So at what age were you when you went to your mother or your granny or, you know, somebody in your family and said, what about this panting, boy? Can I add this panting to the repertoire?
Well, I'll tell you what. Around the time when it was time to choose schools for common entrance, which was what it was called then, SCA is now the new term. I wanted to pass for St. Francois Girls College because I found out that St. Francois Girls College had a resident band, steel band. But at the time, all my teachers, my mom, and myself included, originally wanted Bishop Anstey High School. So that was my first choice school. But when I found out about Pan in France, I begged my mom, I said, Mom, please allow me to change. I want to go to St. Francois. She said, okay, put it as long as you pass for your first choice. So boom, the rest is history. I passed to St. Francois Girls College, and I was so elated. I was it was like a dream come true. At that point in time, I asked my mom, because in the back of my mind, that was the real deal. I said, Mom, can I join the school band and so on? And she said, no, Michelle, you I was so deflated. She said, no, I don't want you going to the band because you always have to rehearse in the pan yard and there'll be men there and so on. And, you know, that sort of stigma was still hovering. So I was denied. And I lived with it, but I still had piano, continuing my grades and everything. So when I got to Form 4, I approached her again. And then she said, sure, Mish, no problem. Because, and I understand, and I think that's what good parenting is about, right? It doesn't necessarily mean because I want to do it that I have to do it then, right? I was able to demonstrate to her over the years that my focus was really on schoolwork, no boyfriend story and that sort of thing. And she realized by then, you know, I'm maturing and developing into a young lady who she believed at the time would really be able to go into that arena and focus on what she's meant to focus on. So eventually I got to play. I joined the band. I just wanted to be involved. So I told them, listen, they were rehearsing for Junior Panorama of that year. I said, no, I know the band is full and so on, because by the time my mom said, yes, bass is loaded. And I said, I'll just knock an iron, I'll play anything to be in. But Vanessa Ford, who was a captain of the band at the time, she knew that I was formally trained in music and playing piano and stuff like that. And she said, no, Michelle, you will go on a tenor pan. And she put me on a tenor pan, and that's it. That's how it started.
So do you remember your first night being in the pan yard and you know, starting to learn that song for Junior Panorama? Do you remember what the song was?
Of course. The song was Symphony in G, which is a Kitchener song. Symphony in G. Yeah. I remember it was so thrilling, because what we would do is after school, we would either travel to St. James, or a group of us decided, hey, back then it was a phenomenal length of time to get a taxi to go to St. James. So we decided we would change. About 3-4 of us will go home by me, because I was not living too far from the school, and we would walk to St. James. Sometimes I remember seeing my aunt and cousins, they'll be driving, going home, and look, Michelle. So anyway, so we are heading to Power Stars Spaniard after school to rehearse. Now, I'm used to piano. With a piano, all the notes are neighboring notes. You have your fingers to do whatever you need to do in terms of chords and so on, but they are, for all intents and purposes, neighboring notes. With the pan, you have notes. You know, the cycle of fifths, which is the tenor pan style that we were playing, you know, you would have C, D, E going like that. You know, it's like every other note, and it's some flat notes on the left side. So it's a different arrangement. And I was saying, oh, Lord, this is what I wanted to learn all this time. It was feeling. And then, too, it was not like an introduction where you're learning scales and you're learning to roll and you're learning, you know, gradually a simple song or rhythmic phrase or something like that. It's delving into a panorama song. So what I used to do, I got a cardboard box, tore it off, and I printed out, drew out all of the notes on the pan. So when I'm not in the pan and I'm at home over the weekend or whatever, I'll be there, practice. And it helped a lot. It was fun too, you know. And gradually, I mean, and this is something that has to be noted too, that you start off thinking or feeling like this is going to be an impossible task. And before you know it, within 3 weeks, you're playing this song, right? And not meaning to go forward too much, but as an arranger, that is one of the things that struck me so much, especially for schools with children, where you would actually have to teach them how to hold the stick, the proper grasp of the stick, teach them to strum, those who need to strum and so on. And it sounds like, oh gosh, will they learn this in time for the competition? And before you know it, boom, proper song. Yeah. Panorama victory and all, you know. So anyway, so that was my testimony about that. Cool.
But that was your first experience playing in Panorama. Does every other time playing in Panorama have that same, you know, buzz, energy, excitement? And I mean, you know, you've gone through so many different roles in the Panorama experience, from absolute novice to player, to manager and captain of a band, to arranger. Yeah. Those are really, really different roles.
Right.
What is the experience like at every of those different roles, encountering the Panorama stage?
That year we placed second. That was my first year playing. The second year, which was 1980, we placed first. We won. And that feeling was like ecstatic. It was that moment when you realize this, it's all worth it, because you're now starting to play, and we were recently on tour, just a month or two before that, we went to Canada, jumpstart now, 1980, January, February, whenever Carnival was, we won. So it was like, what is this, right? Compared to that, the next feeling was being able to play with Phase 2 for the first Panorama, because Phase 2 as a band was like intimidating, because we'd always hear rumors with who get dropped and who get dropped just before they hit the stage and blah, 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 blah. So I was, a little nervous, of course, at first. And but, with the encouragement of some of the guys in the yard and my good friend Alison, who played and encouraged me to join the band and so on, I got over that hurdle, and playing on stage with Phase 2 for that first year was like, what? I felt like, well, you're playing with Phase 2, boy. That sort of way. The next really exhilarating feeling was in the capacity of arranger when we won the Panorama in 2011. And that was like, that like capped it all for me, because it may sound strange, but would you believe that was never like an ambition of mine or goal? I never said, well, I want to play pan, and one day I want to be a captain of a band, and I want to arrange, and I want to win. It was never like, it was just things coming to me, coming my way, and I was responding. I was not really focusing on that, But what I do know is that anything I try to get involved with, anything I put my mind to, anything I decide this is what I'm going to pursue, I try my best to put my best foot forward, so to speak. So these things just kept happening. It was never to go out there and seek and, mash people's feet to get there and that sort of thing. But yeah, that was another exhilarating standout point for me, yeah.
When your mom saw the kind of success that you were having, so she had seen that you had developed a kind of responsibility and stuff. But when you actually started having like real success, how did that make her feel about, the investment that she had put into making you actually figure out if you wanted it or not?
Add something to that. When I first started playing with St. Francois, I have an aunt and my grandmother, very grandmother, who bought me the piano, totally objected to me playing pan. They did not like me being involved in pan because of the stigmas that were attached and so on, But being in the environment myself, I knew this was not what they envisaged. When you hear of something, but you don't see for yourself, you just go away with what you hear, right? So I knew it was a different kettle of fish. But from the time we did that tour of Canada under the auspices of the Scotiabank, that's when they started to come around and realize, wait, traveling, going to Canada, all over Canada, performing, well, okay, right. And gradually, because of, following me and the things I've been getting involved with, they just understood and totally changed. I remember my aunt, even when I started playing single pan band, pan round the neck, she started, I'm saying, Michelle, put it over my neck, let me see. So it was a total 360. And my mom, she has always been very, very proud of my involvement and the achievements that I would have made over time. Always proud to speak of me, to highlight stuff, or anything pan related. Doesn't have to anything to do with me, So it's all embracing now, and I'm very glad to see that despite the initial little hiccup, I've never had that resistance. It has always been support. In fact, one of my mom's brothers, he lived in New York. Unfortunately, he died last year. But he was my number one fan. He would boast about me in New York, and he had a friend who owned one of the radio stations, so he'd be telling Trevor Wilkins, is his name, telling him about me, and Trevor would say, yes, I know Michelle, I saw it. So, and he would always, when he comes for Carnival, he's in the pan yard, he's teasing me and say, but I find Desper sounded better than Phase 2 this time, But just teasing me, But yeah, it's always been that support. My brother, my husband, now my son, 100% friends. Yeah.
You've also played with some of the, very venerable steel bands, the notorious and beloved Casablanca, for example. What was your experience like being part of Casablanca on the front line, traveling with them?
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
Right. With Casablanca, it was that actually I gravitated to Casablanca because T&TEC Power Stars, which is the parent band of St. Francois, they were going through the doldrums. And with the sort of zeal and enthusiasm and passion we had for Pan, we could no longer survive in that environment because they were not making it past preliminaries. The stage side was not, bands tend to go through these, but we were young and passionate and hungry for more. So I ended up going to Casablanca because I lived in Belmont at the time. Casablanca was there. They had just one festival with that great and to date my favorite classical piece on Pan, 1812 Overture. I think they had placed like second in Panorama, and they were doing that era was a very good one for Casablanca. So I went to Casablanca, I joined the band, and some of the members knew us from St. Francois through, I think it was like engagements where St. Francois played in some event where Casablanca was, and things go. So I joined the band, and like every year we were in New York for Christmas. We performed at BAM, Brooklyn Academy of Music. We went on tour to England, and there we played and this was very, I still just like 2 weeks ago, I was going through photos of that tour experience, and we played at the Royal Albert Hall, which, of course, is a very prominent performance center. We also played in Westminster Abbey, which was historical because, you're seeing this is where royalty has had their interactions and so on. And here we are performing. And the acoustics, you'll be amazed by the acoustics there. Yeah. Being in Casablanca was different from being in Phase 2, for example, because of my mentor as far as classical music is concerned, the late Anthony Prospect. He was a stickler for time, which I love. Would you believe panorama practice used to finish by 10:30, 11 in Casablanca? 11 was a late night, right? No, he was not the arranger, but that was the discipline that he brought to the band. Always very punctual, and the way he conducts and so on, I was really attracted to that. So that got me involved in, conducting classical music and so on, like in Schools Festival and that sort of thing. But Casablanca's repertoire was unique. It was unique in the sense that back then, when there were like blockoramas and other engagements and other bands playing stuff, Despa's playing this, Phase 2 playing that, the Pandemonium playing the other, and it's jam, and everybody. Enter Casablanca. Classical music. We might play a calypso here and there, a little something, and, so it was so different. Right? I welcomed it because classical music really enhances your ability as a panist. Because remember, as a panist, you are now playing music that was not written for that instrument. You're playing music that was written for a violin, for example, or viola. So, especially when it comes to the faster passages, it requires a certain type of skill, or sometimes you have to split the band accordingly. One group of tenors playing something to capture what first violins might have been playing, second violins playing something, so you try to give the other half of the tenors and so on. So it's a little more challenging, but very interesting, and it really enhances your skill as a panist. Having played in Casablanca equipped me with the panmanship that was necessary to do well in Phase 2. Because in Phase 2 now, yes, you also have challenging music, and especially challenging phrasing with Boogsy, but you're now more in a jazz idiom sort of musical space, right? But because of, one, my understanding of formal music theory, two, having played classical music with Casablanca that enhanced my skills as a player, going into phase two, it made it easier for me. So I'll always remember this joke. In phase two, back then, each tenor player would have to play the lines of the song. It might be a particular passage that presented some issues or whatever. And I remember Boogsy Sharp asked me, he didn't know my name at the time, he just said, beautiful, play the line and so on, because I was next, And I was like, Lord, if this was my first year playing for Panorama with phase two. I said, Lord, if I mess it up, these fellas going to say, well, where she feels she going, she can't make, whatever, right? And I just played it down. And he said, excellent, or very good, or something like that. And then I realized, yes, I had the respect of the other players. They realized that, I could handle myself, so to speak. Yeah, so it was really different with the two bands.
But how did you make the transition from Casablanca to phase two? Was it a smooth one? Was it just a choice to evolve, or was it a conscious decision to move into a space where you could be more challenged in a different way?
Again, it was basically situational context, because Casablanca, let me tell you, we had gone on tour. We had gone to the US for Christmas, one of the regular Christmas gigs and so on. And when the band came back, some people stayed, and there was a little turmoil at that point in time. And again, like what happened with Power Stars, going through a little downtime sort of thing. So it was actually Pan is Beautiful, which is the Steelband Music Festival. That was the event that was coming up. And I was all prepared, ready to perform with Casablanca and so on. And then they realized they couldn't go. No longer could Casablanca make for the festival for whatever reason. So I said, Lord, I told my friend Alison, I said, Ali boy, Casablanca can't make, no? She said, well, come and play at phase two now. Come and play with us for festival. I said, I think I could make with phase two and all. She said, come on, it'll be nice, and you'll meet so and so, and you'll meet so and so. Like people I would hear her talking about in the past, And eventually I said, okay, I'll come. So I actually went to phase two to play in the Steelband Music Festival. So that was my introduction. So it's like out of classical music with Casablanca to a little touch of classical music in phase two. So maybe that helped with a smoother transition. Of course, you also had to play a calypso of choice, which and that year was Woman is Boss. And that's actually how I ended up in phase two. But I thought it would just have been for the festival and that's it. But I was encouraged by members of the band to stay on and play for the upcoming Panorama. And I did, and that was it. No turning back.
So your entry into phase two came at a time when it was kind of like at the peak of its powers, emerging as a real force to be reckoned with within that steel band pantheon of Big Five. What was it like to enter the Panyard with Boogsy at the helm? How did he shape your own trajectory from player to arranger, exploring your own life in Pan?
Lovely question. Boogsy influenced a lot of my approaches to arranging and my approaches to playing as well, because he always he likes music to be expressed with passion. So he's up to this last Pan event we had for the Taste of Carnival. There's a certain part of the music that he wanted some real rigorous execution. So his favorite term is rough it up, man, rough it up. so he would always inject that into it. And that is what he put is a sort of like a definite pronouncement on the notes that you play when you execute. Those that require, if it's a soft passage or so, it's not going to happen then. But I have adopted that as a player. And as an arranger, what I always liked with his music is, in listening, it's so very conversational. It's not like frontline doing all the work and bass is doing the supportive bum 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 or something like that, and the middle pan strumming happily, strumming away and so on. No, with Bugsy, every voice had an important role at some point in time. So every voice had a voice. So there's a lot of counterpoint. And this hemiola that he did in Woman is Boss, that was like fantastic. I remember I was saying, the band going to crash because here something is happening here totally separate and apart from what the bass is doing, and then the middle's doing something totally different, and everything just comes together in one, So I was always attracted to the conversational aspects of his music. And that influenced me when I got the opportunities to arrange. So you don't just have the bass performing a supportive role, because we tend to think that that's what the bass is supposed to do. The bass can play melody, the bass can do counterpointive phrasing and stuff like that. It can do so many things. Similarly, middle passages, etc., etc. When you listen to classical music too, all the voices are very, very independent at certain points in time of the music. So being around Bugsy and Phase 2 have really... I'd always say it, that I don't think... you never know. But I don't think the way I arrange would have been the way I arranged had I not been in close proximity to Bugsy. And I'd always remember when I started to arrange for Valley Harps. Valley Harps was in the doldrums, right? And when I met with them to have that first meeting, I got the invitation to meet with them to arrange and so on. Though it was for festival too, not for Panorama, it was for festival. And so at the end of the meeting, I asked, I said, so I see you have 2 or 3 players here who come out to practice and so on, even though it's not a practice night. And they said, no, this is a practice night. 3 players, right? So I was like, what am I getting into here? And I brought some of my school students from Trinity College, and they got players as well and so on. And would you believe there was a band? And then because of the music, the calypso of choice, they liked how I had arranged that. And based on that, they asked me if I'd arrange for the ensuing panorama. And I did that and so on. And I remember Bugsy telling me when they first started, say, miss you. Sometimes I go enthusiastic, ready to, give some music. 6 people, 7 people. And Bugsy had called me to ask how things going. Da, da, da. I said, Bugsy, I'm getting so dejected. It's like 6 people in the panyard. He said, Michelle, don't worry about that. No. It's a start. If you have 6 people, more will come. Don't worry, more will come. And so said, so done. People came, so, yeah.
Why did you choose to teach? Of all the things that you could have done, why did you choose teaching?
Actually, while I was in school, I wanted to do law. And by the time I was finished with 6th form, I said, you know what? Teaching is for me. And what really, really cemented it is the basic knowledge that my mom is a teacher. Her 2 sisters were teachers. They're retired teachers. My uncles, family, teachers. And I always remembered, my mom, when we come home from school, she taught literature at one point in her career. And she would come home and share the stories with us, whether it's Silas Marner or Great Expectations or one of the Shakespeare plays, And she would share and have us so interested, my cousins and myself, And it's like, wait, this is what goes on in our classroom too. And, I felt like this is something I would like to do. So much so that, when I got to teachers training college, and we did Julius Caesar was one of the plays. I remember the lecturer would be asking questions, and I'll be spitting off. Then she had to say, okay, Michelle, let someone else ask. Because not only did I study the book before, but I studied it and learned it and lived it with my mom as a girl, like 12 or 13 years old, and she will come and share these stories. So I realized teaching is for me. And that's what made me really get into the profession.
So you have this profession as a teacher. Meanwhile, you also have this parallel profession as a musician. You're going on tour. You are rising in the ranks of phase 2. And eventually you are reaching to leadership positions, both within the Panyard and in your school career. How do those two streams, which seem quite separate, also influence each other and sort of, you know?
When I was, that tour I spoke about, when I was with Casablanca and we were preparing to go to England, I had just started my career as a teacher. And this was at Melville Memorial Girls Anglican School. And the principal at the time was very supportive. I remember because I was, a fledgling in the teaching profession, I was not entitled to any sort of special leave or anything like that. And that's what it would have taken for me to make that tour, because it was 2 months away from school. The school supervisor had turned down my request. And when my principal heard that, she said, "What? No, Michelle, you're an ambassador of the country. I'm going to see to it that you get that special leave and you will get paid as well. They cannot do that. No." And she marched down to the ministry. Oh, yes, special leave, full pay. And, that support meant a lot to me. And it goes to show that sometimes you need people in certain positions to see the bigger picture. And that's what she saw. That was Mrs. Dorothy Milan, now deceased. But she saw the bigger picture. And I was able to go on that tour. Fast forward, I left Melville and I became a music teacher at Trinity College in Moka. While in Moka, I was placed as form teacher. And a few years into being there, Mr. McIntosh, a.k.a. Short Pants, he became principal of the school, and he invited me to be dean at Trinity College. That is when the ministry was now establishing this new administrative structure in schools with department heads and deans and so on. So, of course, I did not apply. And he said to me, called me into his office, "Mrs. Watts, I noticed you did not apply for any of these positions and so on. I'd like you to apply." And so I said, "Well, Mr. McIntosh, I didn't think, it's kind of like my turn or place to apply, because there were house-masters before in the previous system. And I just naturally assumed, well, they will become the deans and they are senior people to me and so on and so on." And you know what he said to me? And this is speaking to your question. He said to me, he said, "Well, if you could handle 100 and something grown men in the Panyard, what are these little boys in this school?" Because at that time, I was playing with phase 2. At that time, I think I was captain. I was captain of the band and so on. And he realized, well, this is nothing for you. He also saw that my interactions with my students, and these are boys, I'm a female, top of the line discipline. And the things I get them to do and so on, and still they gravitate towards me. So I have this ability to be strict with the students when necessary, but at the same time, they can be my best friend. So in the capacity of dean, sometimes I used to have to close my door and lock it and pretend I'm not in the office. Because once I'm there, they leave the teachers. I said, "Did you get permission to leave? Why are you coming?" They want to tell me something with another teacher who had some girlfriend problem, so I'm always there for them, and they know that. I met Ola Tunji a few carnivals ago, and this is Ola Tunji's greeting to me, because I taught him at Trinity as well. Oh gosh, Miss Watts, the dreadest, nicest teacher. And he gave me a big hug. So that is how the balance is struck. And I need to be able to be like that also in the Panyard, especially in the capacity of a section leader, where you have to make decisions, who will play, who wouldn't play this round, or who can only play for finals, who can't play for finals, that sort of thing. Furthermore, as a captain and so on. Those qualities are much needed in both arenas, because, it's like the Panyard is actually an extension of the classroom. Because in a classroom, teaching and learning takes place. What takes place in a Panyard? Teaching and learning, right? So these qualities are much needed in order to get the best of these entities. Educational entity, musical entity, but at the end of the day, it's all education, right? And I have seen where the intersection takes place, and one enhances my ability in the other. One opens the door for me in the other. And that's how it has always been. I often wonder, would I have been an effective teacher? Well, not teacher. I think I was always kind of okay with that. But in the roles of dean and so on, and furthermore, vice principal, how effective would I have been had I not had the background of the Panyard to kind of keep me centered and grounded, and vice versa, right? Had I not been a teacher, how would I have been interacting with a lot of males? And I think God placed me in a boys' school too. Because when I first got the opportunity to teach at Trinity, I questioned it. I questioned myself, should I go there? Would I be able to teach boys? And, and it was like, from day one, it was a nice gel. And it helped me a lot in the steel band world. And what was happening for me in the steel band world also enhanced what was happening in the classroom. Yeah.
And in the midst of all of that, you're also a parent, a wife, a member of a wider family that, is very much connected to each other in terms of commitment and support. What is the balance? Where are the boundaries between Panyard, classroom, other work, adjudication, courtesy, Cotelan, Guinea hen, bring ram coat? Because you have multiple roles.
Right.
You're doing a lot. How do you find space for Michelle in the midst of all of that?
Well, I'll tell you something, Attillah. It's not like finding space for me, I think they are all my space. So, as a parent, as a wife, being able to adjudicate and arrange, etc., that's me. That's my space. And I've never really tried to compartmentalize them. They're all in there. I'm interacting in that space. And what is important to note, it's passion. It's all driven by passion and love. I love what I do. I love teaching. I love music. I love pan. And if I were to do it all over again, exactly the same way, So I know this question you asked, I've been asked that quite a few times. How do you juggle it? You're a parent, you're a wife, you're in the classroom, how do you do it? And so on. And I think sometimes, as a female too, people might wonder, how you could be in the Panyard so often, and then you have to teach, and you have to cook when you go over there. Well, hear this. I don't have to cook. Anyway. COVID has forced me to cook very regularly. But You know, in terms of the domestic things, I think I'm a planner. I always like a plan and like structure, like organization. And that is what helps. If I were to, deep dive into your question a bit, when you plan things and you have a structure and a way of doing things, it makes all the number of things you have to do a little more doable. And what's important too, my husband has been very involved with me in pan. I mean, he can't play a note to save his life. But he has always been there. I mean, everyone knows him. Everybody knows Roger. So he has been there head and head. So even if it's let's say he might have some project for work that he has to attend to. But even if it's just a drop me on particular nights to the panyard and he'll go back to his work. Michelle, call me when you're ready. But I'll call him and he'll come and then he'll end up hanging out in the panyard till I have to say, oh God, Roger, let's go now, kind of thing. So he is like part and parcel of what I do and so on. And I'm very thankful to him for the time and dedication and understanding. Then my son, when my son was very young, from the time he was born, that was the only time I really stayed away from the panyard because, I mean, you can't attend, you have to breastfeed and stuff. So at that point, I took a break. That was just for like a year or so. Yeah, roughly about a year. But then I was back into it, and the good thing again was support. My mom was a pillar of support because she would take care of my son when I have to go to the panyard. And of course, Roger is going with me, my husband, he's going with me. So we are out and she'd be there. I mean, without her help, it would have been really tough, eh? And I'll tell you what was very interesting. And the guys in face, so at the time, they can testify to this. There was a night I took him to the yard with me. And he couldn't even walk yet, still in, the little rocker. And I set him aside in a room we had adjacent to the panyard where I could look into the room and see him at all times. Whoever is passing could see him and so on. And phase 2 is jamming panorama. This is panorama time, full band. And he's in his rocker, sleeping away. Do you know from the time we finished and no more music, that's when he woke up? It's like, what you all did with my lullaby music? So, very nice question. And it's all me. All of it is part of me. It's only now sometimes I tend to think, having done so much for so long, sometimes I tend to think, oh gosh, I want to hop on a plane and find myself in Florida or something. I more feel that need to escape a bit now. And I started doing it in 2019. We would all go, my family and I, we'd all go to Florida and to New York and so on. And enter COVID. But still. Yeah.
The transition to arranging. Mm-hmm. What was that like for you? Yeah. Did you hear the music differently? Mm-hmm. And, figuring out, what is your process figuring out who is going to play what?
So the first venture into arranging came actually with St. Francois, my alma mater. When Mr. Redhead, who was our tutor in Pan, at the time he was captain of T&TEC Power Stars, but he was also the tutor who was assigned to us by the school to teach us. He made it a point to teach us a lot of things about the steel band art form, and not just about playing. He taught us about respecting the instrument, not putting your sweet drink bottles in the pan and stuff like that. And even though I left school, we maintained that connection because we had played for Power Stars. And he knew that I was classically trained in music, formally trained and so on. So for the Schools Festival in 1987, he said, Michelle, why don't you come and work with me? You can do the tune of choice, I'll do the test piece. I said, show me some of that mean. And said, yes, come and try it. So I went up to St. Francois Girls and he was working on his song, I was working on my song, and so on. And I recall the first time I taught them, it was probably like 2 bars or something like that. And we counted them in and they played it back. I was like, oh, I did that. I mean, it's not like I composed it. It's a score I'm reading from and teaching them. But to know that I assigned the correct notes to the correct instrument and that sort of thing, and then you heard it come back to you, I was like, what? But that was the first time I'd ever done anything close to arranging. That was the first time. But then one thing led to the next. I conducted the band for that song. Mr. Redder did the other. And we did it again. 2 of us worked with them for 89. And then Power Stars asked me to arrange for them. And that was only for stage side music. So I do all the stage side songs for them. And that morphed into them asking me to do the panorama. And that was the first time I did any kind of panorama arrangement. And of course, the band didn't make it past prelims. Second year, the band didn't make it past prelims. Both years I arranged, it didn't make it past prelims. But the interesting thing is that they were shy 1 point or 1 band short or something like that of making it to the North Zone finals. So that was a bit of accomplishment because they had not been doing well for quite some time. And then nothing happened until 96. Until 96, yes, 96, I arranged for WoodTrin. And then again in 98. And in 98 is when I got my first victory as an arranger. And that was in Schools Panorama with WoodTrin. We won playing a Boogsy Sharp's composition, Clear the Way.
And what was that victory like? Because, I mean, it's a junior band, but you were the arranger. What is the experience like, seeing the joy on the faces of these young people who are, tasting victory?
Ecstatic. Because you sort of feel like, after everything that we were going through in the panyard for so long, I'm seeing some who could barely hold a stick when we started. And it was like over 100 students. And to know that we played and played so well. I know sometimes you perform and you feel so good that having heard the victory, you're very happy for it, but you're not surprised because you kind of got that feeling. But that is what it was. And there were those kids, they jumped up, they tried to lift me up and say hello. But it was so exhilarating. I'm seeing it now. I'm seeing us now in the savannah jumping up and chanting. And how kids could go on and on and on and on, And I think that was probably the first victory for a female in the pan arena. It wasn't with Valley Harps, at least. Valley Harps that's the adult arena, and right. More significance is attached to that. But with the school, I think that would have been the first. Yeah.
But talk about that, the Valley Harps experience, being the first woman arranger to win a panorama title. What was the process that you entered into to not only create the song, but to lead the band to victory?
Okay, so the process was, because I play the piano, I would usually use my keyboard to do all of my arranging. And I never go to the panyard to determine fresh music. I will always go with prepared music to go and teach, because I think that saves a lot of time, 1. And 2, if I have something prepared, when I get there and it might sound good on the keyboard, but somehow I like how this sounds. I can make changes there, right? But I never like going in without having something prepared first, So I would go on the keyboard and arrange my music, and I'd write it down. And when I say write it down like not in a scored fashion, not notated, just letter names and sharp signs and flat signs, and I will notate phrasing for me to read. But what I would do is persons assigned and being in charge of each section, I'll give them that. And at least they'll have the notes. I'll run through the phrasing with them. And when they have problems, I'll just go through it with them. And I will reference it through the notation that I would have done for myself. And that helps to speed up the process at the same time. So it's sort of like a step before becoming a fully literate, musically literate band where you can bring scores and give, that doesn't happen in a pan. And just as an aside, I don't think that's the way we should go in terms of panorama, because it will be taking away something from the mystery of how we are able to retain all of this music and present it. Because people from abroad, or when we travel and stuff, they're amazed. I remember being, I can't remember where it is right now, and people came around the band and they were looking all underneath to see if there's a recording of some sort, because they can't see that oil drum playing music. It's impossible, right? So I don't think some of those mystery, unique things, I think we should keep. But what was the question again?
The question was your process to bring, from beginning to taking the band to victory.
Right. That particular song.
Yes.
Right. So that song was Do Something for Pan.
Yes.
And there was a controversy with that song because I think Trinidad was taking offense to it. I was like, oh gosh, this tune is so good. I loved because normally I would be in touch with Bugsy to find out like what's he coming with and so on. And he would send it to me. Sometimes it's just on Lala stage. There's la 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 or something like that, And when it was done and he sent me the CD with it, I was like, oh gosh, I would really love to do this. But then all in the news, they say the bands can't play that song and so on and so on. It was resolved and we were able to play it. So the thing is that the main theme about this song is it's a lamentation about the state of Pan, what's being done for it, kind of thing. And it was really pointing the finger to the governing body, which is Trinidad. Nonetheless, my view is it's a musical competition. It's not calypso. it's music you play. And I wanted to do it, so I did it. But one of the things I thought of at some stage while I'm at home on the keyboard arranging and stuff, probably midway in the song or a little past midway, I was thinking, what can I do to project a lamentation? What can I do? Something different. What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And suddenly it hit me, a 12-bar blues progression. This is what I'm really feeling. This is what I'm feeling. So I said, I'll put up 12-bar blues into it. And I'll just give some improvisational type something on top. So I went into the panyard and I explained to them, I said, we're going to do something that's very different. It requires a lot of focus, a lot of feel for the music, because we're going to be changing from the calypso tempo and rhythm to a 12-bar blues progression. So everybody was like, whoa, excited. It was like, way, that sort of thing. And we did it. I taught the basses their part. Dum, bum, bum. Middle lines, doing their little strumming pattern sort of thing. And front line, I did that on the spot because, I really wanted to hear it. And so I just went on the tenor and created some lines until I was satisfied with something, taught them it and so on. And that was it. It took a lot of rehearsal, especially for the front line to get it, because it has to sound like a lamentation. My baby left me. That sort of thing. Oh, what will I do? So to capture that, the lines had to be very syncopated and not planned, like when the next entry point would be, sort of thing. So that took some practice. But then they got it, and I have a good drummer, Dane. He really helped to keep them there and to maintain the support that was needed. And I remember when we went to the panorama, some people were saying on radio, on TV, were saying, but why she did that, boy? I mean, this is panorama, this is not a funeral, why, you know? And I just laughed because I'm like, wow, some people just don't get this. And that made me think, you know, maybe steel bands ought to be able to do like mass bands. You know, when mass bands pass on stage, there's a whole history and background, so their portrayal and so on. Perhaps steel bands need to do that too. By the time we hit semis and definitely for finals, everybody got it. And what was the focus was that challenge to be able to, wait, now she coming out of that slow part now. You know, and we won with it. We won with it. There's a chance I took. And I remember, if you watch the video, when we reached that slow part and we came out of it successfully and back into the jam and so on, I looked at the drummer and the band and I did so. Because it's like, no.
So were there other women arrangers around at the time who were doing similar work to you? Or, you know, were you one lone woman in the...
Actually, I was like the lone ranger. There were no other females functioning in the capacity of arrangers then. Like, well, based on interviews and stuff, you know, some of the interviewers will say, well, you know, you're opening the doors for other women and so on. And to me, that is exactly what I was hoping for. Because, you know, I think when I looked around, you know, there are very good, excellent panists, female panists, right? But females need to get into other aspects of the art form as well, you know. So be it tuning and arranging, which were like very much male-dominated arenas, right? So it was sort of like a hope, a wish that there would be other women, you know, seeing a step being made and other bands would have, you know, some sort of faith in the abilities of women to engage them to arrange. Because, you know, there might be a female or two out there who would very much want to arrange, but then they're not getting the opportunities as well. So it's not just about, I want to arrange, so I'll be an arranger. No, somebody has to want you to come to work for them. So the hope was also that bands would see that a female is, you know, sufficiently capable to take a band to a panorama, furthermore take them all the way to a final and so on, and engage some female arrangers. And I'm very happy to say that gradually that took place. Chanel Abraham is one who came out, and of course we have Vanessa, Natasha, and, you know, it's Avis, Bruce, and you know, it's good to see that there's an attempt to balance in this whole art form, this whole arena, you know.
So you've had a long career in Pan, from learning as a student and experiencing the resistance of your grandmother to you wanting to be involved in a steel band, coming right up to the Panyard of today, which is very much a space of having lots of young women drawn to steel band. How has the perception of women being involved in steel band changed in the years that you have been involved in the steel pan movement?
Right, okay. The perception of pan itself, whether male involved or female. I'll get to the female part, but I'll share a story with you. My uncle, one of my uncles, one I'd mentioned earlier, who was my biggest fan in New York and so on. When he was much younger, he was interested in playing pan and so on. But in his era, steel bands was with a lot of violins and only bajans and that sort of thing. So he got a guy who was living not too far from where they were living at the time to teach him. So he got the guy and he with the pan and he's learning boom, 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 or what have you. He said all of a sudden he heard like a storm was coming. That storm was my grandmother, his mother. She just appeared out of nowhere, and this guy was a bajan, so to speak. And my grandmother told him, "Get away from my son! Get out of here!" And the man ran with his pan. And this was a bajan running from my grandmother. So that was the perception of pan. Only vagabonds, that sort of thing. Worse yet, I mean, for female sparrow said it.
If you go with a steel band man, they will want to break your hand.
Correct. That's it, So women were not to even dream of pan in their sleep, But gradually, right, that perception started to be erased. And, it was a societal thing. And it doesn't stop at the everyday Joe. I mean, even churches would not want steel band in the church. All right. Now we have, I'm testimony to it, Casablanca in Westminster Abbey. And now every other church you go to has pan in it. Right? So the perception has changed drastically throughout. And that, in turn, has helped with the perception of women being involved in pan, because that stigma of it being only for those impoverished people who don't work and they are bajans and they have nothing else to do but play that pan and so on, that is out of the window. And I'll have to say too, with the interest of the outer eyes and ears, we tend to do that. It gets rubber stamped in Europe, it gets rubber stamped in the US, and it's good, man, right? So the type of interest that has been shown by musicians and non-musicians in those countries have also helped with the sort of view that is held of the pan here. I'll share this too. In one of my, and it's a good thing. I remember there was a time, panists will kind of be close-knit about this whole art form. So if a foreigner, so to speak, comes and expresses interest and they want to learn to play, they come to tea for a pan. Why would that, that position always bothered me. I found it was senseless. So we will create this fantastic instrument and leave it here in Trinidad. Let's stay right here and that's it. Where's the growth? Where's the development? Where's its place and position as a world instrument when you do that, right? The piano does not remain wherever the piano was invented. The saxophone, how come we know about these instruments and use them here? For back in the day, brassorama and so on. So you have to let it go. So when people show that interest, and to me, that is a big plus. And now, I was in France a few years ago conducting some workshops, and the kind of care and attention they give to the instrument itself, total respect. Each bass pan in a case with if it's not a zip, I've seen some bands, you press a button and the lid flips open, you open up your bass, and, that sort of, so it's a world instrument, let it fly, right? What we have to do, and sorry I'm going this way, but what we have to do is, safeguard our name as being the originators and inventors and so on, right? We have to start looking forward to interactions with the art form differently, not just for a panorama event or a gig down the road or something like that. There are lots of other areas that need to be fully explored and developed to take the art form forward, not here in Trinidad alone, but internationally, right? So I just need to mention that.
Yes. What does a better tomorrow for pan look like for you?
A better tomorrow, very interesting question. Pan not being confined in Trinidad and Tobago to a competition called Panorama. I never thought I'd be saying that because I always found Panorama to be a very fantastic, dramatic musical event. And I still love it, right? If they say Panorama tomorrow, I'll be involved. But I just don't think that's the only way to go. So A Better Tomorrow for me will entail something where there's sustainability throughout the year for the art form and for the participants. And this is where, to me, A Better Tomorrow for Pan, that's the direction we should be going in. One very important aspect, though, is for A Better Tomorrow in Pan. You see, sound, the miking of Pan to trap the best possible sound, I think that still poses a lot of challenges. And that is something that needs to be explored more, whether it's through the engineering department and UE or I don't know. But we need to focus on that a bit more to get the best possible sound of the pan because it's metal and it poses a challenge and we still haven't got it right after all these years, you know?
And how do you see the work that you're doing right now as tied to that building of a better tomorrow?
So I'm thinking as along the journey, it's about passing on the baton. Everything you do, the intention is about passing on the baton. So, for instance, I do a pan arranging 2-week workshop with the Pan and Schools Coordinating Council, where I teach aspiring arrangers, school teachers, anyone interested in pan, regular panists, about arranging and how to arrange for Panorama specifically, right? And that is passing the baton because I've been doing that for quite a few years. And I have been seeing my students arranging. One of them arranged for Cooper Joylanders. And I remember when you were in school, he said, Miss, Pan saved my life because, where I live, I could have gone anyway. I could have been into drugs, into banditry and so on. And Pan really made a big difference. Right now he's in, where's he, boy? Stefan is in Dubai or somewhere. And full-fledged job teaching pan in schools and stuff, right? I remember he used to tease me and he would say, Miss, one day I'll beat you in Panorama, I say, well, that is what I want. When you do that, I will know that I have taught you well, And I've seen quite a few of them emerge to be arrangers, and that is fulfilling, and that is what is leading towards the better tomorrow, right? So the tuners, whoever have to tune and that sort of thing, pass the baton on, so we are building towards a better tomorrow in pan. You're judging, right? You're building towards a better tomorrow in terms of the format for judging, because there are a couple aspects of the criteria that I find don't make sense. So, given the right ears, I would like to get that platform to, just state that, listen, why is this particular section here or why is this not accounted for when that is a very important aspect of a performance? But that, again, is building towards a better performance. So it's all about, it's like a scaffolding approach. So you start here, and you just keep building and building and building towards a better tomorrow. It ought to be about that. So you nurture, you watch it grow gradually towards that better place called tomorrow.
Michelle, thank you so much for sharing with us these amazing stories of your journey and your life as a woman in pan.
All right, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Great.
Another opportunity to tell my story.